Here is part 1, 500 words of the short story. He kept going and I allowed it. Small Blue Diamond Part 1. The unexpected arrival, 500 words. The house had been still for weeks. Even the creaks in the wooden floorboards seemed to respect the silence I lived in. I spent most mornings drinking cold coffee, pretending to read, while dust gathered on shelves that hadn't seen care in months. It was on one such morning that he arrived. No warning, no message. Just a quiet knock at the door that stirred something I thought I had buried long ago. I opened it and there he stood, taller than I remembered, leaner, his jaw more defined. His eyes weren't the same. They used to search for approval. Now they searched for something else entirely. Maybe answers. Maybe a fight. "Hey," he said simply. No hug. Just a duffel bag slung over one shoulder and that old hoodie he used to wear, sleeves stretched from years of anxious tugging. "Come in," I replied, stepping aside. My voice cracked without permission. He walked in without hesitation, eyes sweeping across the hallway like a visitor rather than someone who once called this place home. I followed him in silence, unsure of what I was supposed to feel. Guilt, relief, dread. All of them, probably. He set his bag down in the spare room. The one that used to be his. He didn't ask. I didn't offer. It was as if we both agreed not to speak about the past just yet. Dinner was awkward. I made pasta, his favorite, or at least it used to be. He barely touched it. The clinking of his fork on the plate was the loudest sound in the room. "You look tired," I said at one point, just to fill the air. "Long bus ride," he answered. That was it. That night, I lay in bed listening to him walk around upstairs. Slow, measured steps. Sometimes stopping, sometimes pacing. I imagined him standing in front of his childhood closet, wondering where all his posters had gone. Or maybe sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the blank ceiling, counting how many versions of me he had imagined over the years. Versions that left, stayed, yelled, cried. Versions that said goodbye. I had never given him that. When I closed my eyes, I could still hear his footsteps. They weren't frantic. They weren't angry. They were steady, like someone trying to make sense of where they were, step by step. There was no confrontation, no apology, no yelling yet. Only a growing sense that something had been cracked open. And even if we weren't ready to face it, it had already begun. He had come back. Not as a boy needing comfort, but as someone looking for truth, no matter how painful. And I wasn't sure I was ready to give it. But he kept going. And I allowed it. Let me know when you're ready for part 2, or if you'd like background music suggestion, narration script, or scene visuals. Here is part 2, 500 words of the short story, He Kept Going and I Allowed It. Small Blue Diamond Part 2. The Push and the Pull, 500 words. Mornings became a ritual of silence. He'd come into the kitchen after me, not too early, not too late. Always after I had set out just one cup. I started making 2. He never thanked me and I never asked if he wanted one. But he drank it anyway, black, no sugar. Like his father used to. He never mentioned his dad. Neither did I. Instead we lived in this strange dance. Close but never touching. Words hovered in the air but never landed. I'd be chopping vegetables and he'd walk behind me, close enough for me to feel the warmth of his shoulder. He never said excuse me. I never asked him to. Sometimes I'd look up and find him watching me from the doorway, just standing there. His eyes soft, curious. Not angry but not entirely calm either. I couldn't tell if he was studying me or remembering me, or both. One afternoon, he lingered longer than usual. I was rearranging books in the living room, half for distraction, half out of habit. He picked one off the shelf, an old hardcover he'd gifted me when he was 14. "You never opened it," he said flatly, flipping through the stiff, untouched pages. I swallowed hard. I kept it. That mattered. He placed it back but not with care. It landed on the shelf with a quiet thud, misaligned from the others. He left the room and I let it stay crooked. The house began to shift. His energy filled corners I hadn't noticed in months. He started doing little things, fixing the squeaky back door, cleaning the gutters, stacking firewood neatly by the porch. All without a word. He was moving, pushing forward, claiming space. And I let him. One night, I found him sitting on the porch steps, looking out into the dark. I stood by the doorway, unsure if I should join him. He didn't ask, but I did anyway. We sat in silence for a while, watching moths circle the porch light. "Why didn't you fight for me?" he asked suddenly. The question landed like a stone in my chest. Not shouted, not accused. Just, "I thought I was protecting you," I whispered. "By disappearing." Had no answer. He looked at me then, not as a stepson, not as a boy, but as a young man trying to find closure from someone who owed it to him. I didn't cry. Neither did he. The pain had aged too much to come out in tears. Instead, I let the silence stretch between us, not as avoidance this time, but as permission, for him to speak and for me to listen. He kept going, peeling back everything I had buried under time, excuses and silence. And I allowed it. Let me know when you're ready for part 3, or if you'd like voiceover tone suggestions or scene transitions for this segment. Here is part 3, 500 words of the short story, He Kept Going and I Allowed It. Small Blue Diamond Part 3. The breakdown, 500 words. The storm came on a Tuesday. It started with a slammed drawer, followed by the shattering of a coffee mug in the sink. I didn't flinch. I just looked up from the kitchen table and waited. He was standing there, fists clenched. Here is part 4, 500 words of the short story, He Kept Going and I Allowed It. Small Blue Diamond Part 4. The quiet aftermath, 500 words. The morning after was quiet, not the kind of silence that hurts, but the kind that feels like something has settled. Like a storm has passed and left everything soaked but standing. I woke to the smell of coffee. When I walked into the kitchen, he was already there. 2 mugs sat on the counter. One for him. One for me. He didn't look up. He just pushed mine closer with one hand and continued reading something on his phone with the other. "Thanks," I said, voice still raw. He nodded once. That was all. We didn't talk about the night before. Not in detail. The things that needed to be said had been spoken, spilled out into the room like broken glass. Now we were stepping around the shards carefully, choosing not to bleed any more than we already had. Instead, we talked about simple things. The garden. A movie he said I should watch, though I wasn't sure if it was a real recommendation or just something to say. Still, I wrote down the title. Later that day, I found the letter I had written him weeks ago but never gave. I had almost thrown it out after he arrived, thinking the moment had passed. But now I slipped it under his door while he was out for a walk. When I came back from the grocery store, the letter was gone from the floor. I didn't ask him if he read it. I didn't need to. That evening he told me dinner was on him, and he cooked. Nothing fancy, just grilled sandwiches and soup. But it was something. He sat across from me at the table we had once shared as strangers in our own home. He didn't speak much, just chewed quietly. But his foot tapped lightly under the table, and once or twice, I caught him glancing up at me with a softness I hadn't seen in years. After dinner he cleaned the dishes. Let him. I walked into the living room and stood by the bookshelf. That same book, the one he gave me when he was 14, still sat crooked on the shelf where he had left it. I reached out, straightened it, and smiled. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the leaves. But inside there was stillness. A different kind of quiet. One that felt earned. He came into the room, took a blanket from the back of the couch, and settled onto the armchair. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. For the first time I felt like we were both choosing to stay. He had come back not for answers, but for the chance to be seen. Fully, painfully, honestly. And I gave him that. He kept going, walking toward the truth we had both avoided for too long. And I allowed it. Maybe that's what healing really looks like. Not loud forgiveness, but quiet presence. Let me know if you'd like this turned into a voiceover script, a YouTube short adaptation, or visual storyboard prompts.